Hello friends, I am Rajiv Rao. Today we are going to deal with bills of exchange. This particular topic is there in second sem. So, what is a bill of exchange? So, in this topic we are going to discuss about what is a bill of exchange, what are its particular features, what is the difference between bill of exchange, promissory note, then again what is a check, then how to do the problems on this. So, my intention is to make this particular subject easily understandable to you people. So, let us begin our class without wasting much of our time. So, this particular bill of exchange, simply here you can understand that a businessman will be dealing in various types of transactions. In other words, here cash transactions as well as credit transactions there, particularly when he sells the goods on credit or when he buys goods on credit there. The problem will be one particular party will be foregoing the good there, in other words the seller, whereas the buyer, he will be purchasing it with a promise to make payment in the future date. So, to settle this type of transactions there, because the money has to, in other words the money will be moving in that transaction in the future there, okay, some particular relevant document should be there whereby this particular seller will be able to recover the money from the buyer there. So, this type of credit transactions can be solved by writing one particular document there or one particular written statement, okay, which we will call literally a bill of exchange or a promissory note. So, basically we should be able to understand what is a bill of exchange or a promissory note. See, ఈ బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ లేదా ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ అనేది నేను తెలుగులో కొద్దిగా ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేయడానికి కారణం ఏంటంటే ఇది లోకల్ లాంగ్వేజ్ మీకు ఈజీగా అర్థమవుతుందని తెలుగులో చెప్తా ఉన్నాను. సాధారణంగా అరువు వ్యవహారాలు ఏవైతే ఉంటాయో, క్రెడిట్ ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ ఏవైతే జరుగుతూ ఉంటాయో అందులో ఈ పేమెంట్స్ ఏదైతే ఉన్నాయో అవి ఫ్యూచర్లో చేయడం అనేది జరుగుతుంది. కాబట్టి దాన్ని సెటిల్ చేయడానికి గాను ఈ రాసుకునేటటువంటి డాక్యుమెంట్ని మనం బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ లేదా ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ అంటారు. ఇంతకీ బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ అంటే ఏంటి, ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ అంటే ఏంటి? See, we are having one particular called as Negotiable Instruments Act, okay, of 1881. So, according to that Negotiable Instruments Act of 1881, three instruments are basically called as negotiable. One is bill of exchange, okay, one is bill of exchange. Second one is called as promissory note, and the third one is called as check. These three are called as negotiable instruments. Okay, so basically here what is a bill of exchange? See, you can understand this in a simple manner by seeing this particular illustration. Okay, ఈ ఉదాహరణని చూడడం ద్వారా మీకు ఈజీగా అర్థమవుతుంది బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ అంటే ఏంటి, ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ అంటే ఏంటి. బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్కి తెలుగులో వర్తకపు బిల్లులు అంటారు. ఓకే, వర్తకపు బిల్లులు అంటే వర్తక వ్యవహారాలు నిర్వహించడానికి రాసుకునేటటువంటి బిల్లులు అని అర్థం. సో హియర్ టేక్ దిస్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, ఎక్స్ ఇస్ దేర్, వై ఇస్ దేర్. ఎక్స్ ఇస్ ద సెల్లర్, వై ఇస్ ద బయ్యర్. See, here one credit transaction when it has taken place between X and Y, in other words Y is purchasing goods from X on credit. If you observe here, in this particular credit transaction, if X writes one instrument on the name of this particular Y, we will call it as a bill of exchange. In other words, here if Y writes one particular undertaking and if he gives it to X there, we will call it as a promissory note. చిన్నగా చెప్పాలి అంటే ఎక్స్ వై ఇద్దరు బిజినెస్ మ్యాన్, ఎక్స్ అనేవాడు బిజినెస్ మ్యాన్, వై అనేవాడు కొనుగోలుదారుడు అనుకోండి, ఇతడు అమ్మకందారుడు కొనుగోలుదారుడు. ఇటువంటి సందర్భంలో వై ఎక్స్ దగ్గర నుండి రూపాయన కొనుగోలు చేసినప్పుడు ఎక్స్ వై పేరు పైన గిట్ట ఒక పత్రాన్ని రాసినట్టయితే దాన్ని మనం వర్తకపు బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ అంటాము. దానికి అగెనిస్ట్గా వైఏ ఒక లిఖితపూర్వకంగా ఒక డాక్యుమెంట్ రాసి ఇచ్చాడు అనుకోండి రిటర్న్ మేనర్లో, ఏమని నీ వద్ద నుండి పొందిన ప్రయోజనానికి గాను నీకు కానీ లేదా నువ్వు తెలిపిన వ్యక్తికి డబ్బులు చెల్లిస్తాను అని రాసిస్తే దాన్ని మనం ఏమంటామంటే ప్రామిసరీ నోటు అని అంటారు. సో దిస్ ఇస్ బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్, దిస్ ఇస్ ప్రామిసరీ నోట్. ఓకే, నౌ యూ కెన్ అండర్స్టాండ్ వాట్ ఈస్ ది బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్. సి, అకార్డింగ్ టు డెఫినేషన్ ఆఫ్ ద నెగోషియబుల్ ఇన్స్ట్రుమెంట్స్ యాక్ట్, ఇన్ నెగోషియబుల్ ఇన్స్ట్రుమెంట్స్ యాక్ట్ సెక్షన్ 4 defines promissory note, section 5 defines bill of exchange, section 6 defines check. ఓకే, అన్యాక్రాంత యోగ్యతా పత్రాల చట్టం అనేది మనకి నెగోషియబుల్ ఇన్స్ట్రుమెంట్స్ యాక్ట్ అని, ఆ యాక్ట్ ప్రకారం మనకి సెక్షన్ 4 అనేటటువంటిది ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ని డిఫైన్ చేస్తుంది. సెక్షన్ 4 వచ్చి ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ డిఫైన్ చేస్తుంది. సెక్షన్ 5 బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ అంటే వర్తక బిల్లుని నిర్వచిస్తుంది. తర్వాత సెక్షన్ 6 చెక్ను డిఫైన్ చేస్తుంది. సో అకార్డింగ్ టు దిస్ పర్టికులర్ వన్ హియర్ యూ కెన్ రిమెంబర్ జస్ట్ లైక్ PBC 456. Okay, you can remember this particular sections here. So section 5 of bill of exchange, the definition is something like this. Okay, section 5, what it says, bill of exchange is an instrument in writing containing an unconditional order signed by the maker directing a certain person to pay a certain sum of money only to or to the order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. Okay, so here you can see this particular definition clearly. If you understand this definition clearly, you will be able to know exactly what is a bill of exchange there. So you will be able to know the features of bill of exchange with clarity if you understand this definition in a correct manner. See, observe here what it says, a bill of exchange is an instrument in writing. So here bill of exchange is one instrument which is in the written form. Okay, it is in the written form only, containing an unconditional order. See, in this particular one, if you observe this particular word, 3 months after date, pay to, okay, this particular word pay to reflects that this is an order passed by the seller on the buyer. In other words, the creditor on the debtor. So this is an order instrument. Okay, signed by the maker. Okay, it is signed by whom? Signed by the maker. Who is the maker? The person who writes this instrument. Who writes? X. In other words, the seller here. So seller is writing this particular instrument. It is a signed by this particular maker. Then again, directing a certain person. What is he doing? He is directing one particular certain person, one particular exact person whose name is written in this instrument. He is directing, okay, he is directing this particular Y. Okay, he is directing a certain person. This particular Y is nothing but here our buyer there. Certain person, what for? To pay a certain sum of money. In other words, he is ordering what for? To pay one particular exact sum of money, certain sum of money. That sum of money is nothing but here in this particular example, here we can say a sum of rupees 2000. Okay, pay a certain sum of money only to, in other words, here this certain sum of money is also written both in figures as well as in the words there. And again, what is telling? Only to, in other words, pay this particular money only to him, or to the order of a certain person, or to whomever the other part, to whomever is the person who is the holder in due course in the due date, before the due date, to his particular order you pay it, or to the bearer of the instrument. In other words, here on the due date, whoever is the bearer of this instrument, pay to him. Okay, like that he is ordering this particular person. See, after writing this particular instrument, okay, who writes here? This particular seller, he is writing this instrument on this buyer, directing this particular buyer to make this particular amount to be paid on the due date to him or to whomever the other person, whoever is the holder, in other words, whoever is the holder in due course before the due date, okay, or whoever is the bearer of that instrument on the due date. So like that he is ordering to this particular person. See here in this particular instrument, after writing this instrument will be kept in front of this particular buyer, okay, here one revenue stamp will be affixed, then he will say accepted, okay, then again he will put a signature. Okay, it reflects that he is accepting whatever is written in this instrument in toto. That means as it is, he is accepting without making any modification. As such, we will say it is an unconditional order. In other words, here this particular condition, okay, in other words, this particular order which is being placed by this particular seller and the buyer is without any particular preconditions there. It is accepted as it is. Okay, so this is bill of exchange here. You can observe here, when this particular acceptor signs here, it means the bill is accepted. Till this particular acceptance is not done, this particular instrument which is being written, we can call it as a draft. Okay, it will become a bill of exchange only when it is accepted. So here, based upon this particular one, here you can see the features of this particular bill of exchange here. See what all features are there. You can write it in your own words here. What are the features of a bill of exchange? See, this bill of, if you understand this particular definition with clarity, with the features you can write it with ease there. Okay, observe here, this particular bill of exchange is a features are, first one, it is a instrument in writing. Okay, it is an instrument in writing. I have written it here. It is an instrument in writing. Second one, it is signed by this particular maker, the person who is writing this instrument. In other words, this particular seller. Then again, it contains an unconditional order. Now here, this particular bill of exchange is an unconditional order. Okay, it contains an unconditional order. The order, what for this particular order is being placed? The order is placed in order to pay the money only. Bills will be written only for the payment to be paid in money terms only, but for not any other thing other than that of money. Okay, so this particular money also should be payable to one particular definite person. Definite, the meaning here is the name of the party. Okay, it is specifically written here in this instrument. Then the amount is payable as on one specific time. Okay, here what he says, 3 months after date. Okay, so observe here, 3 months after date when he says there. 3 months after date means from this particular date onwards, after 3 months he is asking. In other words, here by reading this particular instrument, certainty will be there, exactness will be there. Okay, one will be able to know what is the due date here. See how we will calculate the due date here. Normally, a bill will be calculated something like this, the due date here. From 5th January onwards, for 3 months means here, you can observe January to February 1 month, February to March, March to April, April 5 plus 3 grace days will be for every particular bill to calculate the due date. So the 3 days if you observe, if you add it, okay, January to February, February to March, March to April, April 5 plus 3 days, April 8th will be the due date for this particular bill. So here another feature what it says here is the amount is payable on a specific time there. Okay, it is nothing but in our example, okay, what we said, January to February, to March, March to April, April 5 plus 3, April 8th is the due date for this particular bill. Okay, or demand he says, because you can observe bills can be drawn. In other words, there will be 2 types of bills there. Bills of exchange are of 2 types, time bills as well as demand bills. Okay, time bills are payable according to that of the time, just like this particular example reflects a time bill. Okay, demand bills are those particular bills. In other words, the money will be payable upon demand by that particular seller there. Whenever he demands, the amount on that particular bill has to be paid. They are called as demand bills. Okay, now coming to another feature here, the name of the drawee is mentioned here. Okay, he said a drawee. Okay, when he said a drawee, we can understand like this. Basically, to a bill of exchange, there are 3 parties. Okay, parties to a bill of exchange are 3. One is called as a drawer. Okay, one is called as a drawer. One is called as drawer. Second one is called as drawee. Third one is called as payee. Okay, these are the 3 parties to a bill of exchange. Okay, who are these? Drawer is the person who draws the instrument. Drawer is the person who writes the instrument. So here in this case, in this particular example, you can understand here our seller, okay, the person who is writing this particular instrument is said to be the drawer. Okay, so drawer is the person who draws the instrument, whereas drawee is the person who accepts this particular written matter in this particular instrument. He is called as drawee, or we can also call him as acceptor. Okay, so drawee is the person who accepts the instrument. Then again, the payee is the person who receives the payment on the due date on this particular bill. So basically, there are 3 parties to a bill of exchange: drawer, drawee, payee. Drawer is the person who draws the instrument. Drawee is a person who accepts the instrument. In other words, he accepts to make the payment here on the written, whatever he has is being written in the instrument. Then again, payee is the person who receives the payment on the due date on this particular bill. So these are the 3 parties basically, okay, to a bill of exchange. See, in this particular features, okay, in other words, this particular document is a very important one because it is a legal document, because it is stamped here. Okay, revenue stamp will be affixed here, and it will be written accepted by, and it will be signed by this particular drawee. As such, it will become a legal bill. That means here drawer will have every other right to recover the money from the drawee. Okay, even if on the due date, if this particular drawee won't make payment, he can go to court of law and he can recover that particular money. So this is one particular benefit of this particular bill of exchange. So that's why bill of exchange is having a lot of relevance in business circles, particularly in case of a trade transactions there. So this is about bill of exchange. I hope once again the features of bill of exchange are: it is a instrument in writing, it is an unconditional order. Okay, in other words, here the date is written, the date is mentioned here in this instrument. There is in other words, is a dated instrument. The date on which the bill is being written, it is written there. Then again, the name of the drawer and the drawee both are specifically written here, are mentioned here. The amount is written both in words as well as in figures. In other words, here the amount is certain here. Okay, it is a specific in nature. Okay, so in other words, here this is in other words, the due date is also being clearly mentioned here in this particular. Another due date also one can calculate. Okay, in other words, the amount payable is on a one specific date. Okay, or if it is demand bill, it is payable upon a demand there. So these are some particular basic features of this particular bill of exchange. Now you can understand here, బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ అనేటటువంటిది ఒక వర్తక బిల్లు అని అంటాం మనం ఇక్కడ దీన్ని. ఈ వర్తక బిల్లు అనేటటువంటిది మనం ఇప్పుడు చెప్పుకునేటటువంటిది ఏంటంటే, ఒక అమ్మకందారుడు కొనుగోలుదారుడికి రూపాయిని అమ్మినప్పుడు వాడిపైన రాసేటటువంటి పత్రాన్ని మనం వర్తక బిల్లు అంటున్నాం. ఓకే, ఈ బిల్లులకు ఉన్నటువంటి ఒక లక్షణం ఏంటి అంటే, గడువు తేదీ నాడు ఈ కొనుగోలుదారుడికి డబ్బులు చెల్లించకపోతే ఈ అమ్మకందారుడు దానిపైన రావాల్సిన పైకాన్ని రాబట్టుకోవడానికి అవకాశం ఉంటుంది, ఎందుకంటే ఇది చట్టపరమైనటువంటి పత్రం కాబట్టి. సో ఇందులో ఏమి రాస్తారు అని అంటే, ఈ అమ్మకందారుడు రాస్తున్నాడు కాబట్టి నా వద్ద నుండి పొందిన ప్రయోజనానికి గాను నాకు కానీ లేదా నేను తెలిపిన వ్యక్తికి కానీ ఈ రోజు నుండి 3 మాసముల తర్వాత చెల్లించండి అని చెప్పేసి ఒక లిఖితపూర్వకంగా రాసినటువంటి ఒక పత్రము. ఇందులో రాసినటువంటి విషయాలని పైన దీనికి పైన ఒక స్టాంప్ అఫిక్స్ చేయడం జరుగుతుంది. ఈ స్టాంప్ పైన కొనుగోలుదారుడు, ఓకే, వీడిని ఏమంటామో డ్రాయి అంటాము, ఈ కొనుగోలుదారుడు దాన్ని యాక్సెప్ట్ చేస్తాడు, అంటే సరే అని చెప్పేసి దాన్ని సంతకం పెట్టడం జరుగుతుంది. అలా యాక్సెప్ట్ చేస్తాడు కాబట్టి చట్టపరంగా దీనిపైన రావాల్సిన డబ్బాని కొనుగోలుదారుడు చెల్లించకపోతే దాన్ని రాబట్టుకునే అవకాశం మనకి అమ్మకందారుడికి ఉంటుంది. ఓకే, తెలుగులో మనం చెప్పుకోవాలి ఏంటంటే, ఇందులో ఉండేటటువంటి పార్టీలు ఎవరైతే ఉన్నారో డ్రావర్, డ్రాయి, పేయి అని చెప్పేసి వాళ్ళని ఏమంటారంటే కర్త, స్వీకర్త, గ్రహీత అంటారు. కర్త అంటే బిల్లు రాసే వ్యక్తిని కర్త అంటాము. ఓకే, ఈ బిల్లుని స్వీకరించే వాడిని స్వీకర్త అంటాము. గ్రహీత అంటే గడువు తేదీ నాడు ఎవడైతే డబ్బులు రిసీవ్ చేస్తాడో వాడిని మనం గ్రహీత అంటారు. ఓకే, సో దిస్ ఇస్ అబౌట్ బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్. Well, now let us discuss regarding promissory note. What is a promissory note? See, promissory note here is nothing but here, as I have already told to you people, if this particular buyer, if he writes one particular instrument and if he gives it to X, in other words, if he promises, in other words, if he gives in writing, which we will call it as an undertaking, okay, saying that for whatever value I have received from you, I will pay to you or to your order the sum of rupees. If he specifically with clarity, if he writes this instrument and if he gives to this particular seller, then we will call it as a promissory note. Okay, now let's see this particular definition. Here in our example, Y, who is the buyer, okay, this particular buyer, okay, if he writes one particular undertaking and if he gives it to the seller, then we will call it as a promissory note. Okay, basically here you can observe X is the creditor, Y is the debtor in this particular relationship. So a debtor, if he writes one instrument and if he gives to the creditor, then we will call it as a bill of exchange, promissory note. Now let's see this particular definition. This particular promissory note is an instrument in writing, so it is also in the written form only. Okay, promissory note is also in the written form, containing an unconditional undertaking. Okay, undertaking is nothing but it is a promise which is being made, which is given in writing there. Okay, it is an unconditional undertaking. In other words, here without keeping any particular conditions, he is saying that I will pay you for whatever value I have received from you. So signed by the maker. So who is the maker here? The maker is nothing but this particular buyer or the debtor. He is signing it here. Okay, what for? To pay a certain sum of money. In other words, he is signing it and is writing this instrument to say that I am going to pay you this particular certain sum of money. In other words, I am going to pay you 2000 in this illustration, 2000 rupees. Okay, it is written both in figures as well as in words there. In other words, here the instruments, negotiable instruments, whenever we write it, there should not be any particular confusion. Okay, by reading that particular instrument, one should get that particular certainty, that exactness, that is who is the party to whom it should be paid, how much money it should be paid. There should not be any particular ambiguity, there should not be any particular confusion here. Okay, to pay a certain sum of money only to, that means only to this particular person, only to this particular X there, okay, who is the seller, or to the order of a certain person, or to whomever he orders to pay it, or to the bearer of the instrument, whoever bears this instrument on the due date to that particular party. So like that, in other words, this particular buyer, he is promising, okay, by writing this instrument that I will pay the money to you for the value received from you. Okay, this much money I will pay to you or to whomever you say, or to whomever that particular person who is the holder in due course is there, he orders to pay it, or I will pay to the person who is the bearer of the instrument on the due date. So like that, he is making a promise and he is giving this particular promissory note. So that's why we will call it as a promissory note. So basically, if you observe here, the features of this particular promissory note are also more or less similar to that of bill of exchange, with a slight change, where bill of exchange is an instrument in writing there, but it is a unconditional order, whereas here it is an unconditional undertaking. See, if you see this particular definition also, okay, we will not find much difference here in this particular definition also. The definitions are also more or less of similar type here. Only the thing we should understand here is bill of exchange is an order passed by the seller on the buyer, because you observe in a credit transaction, seller's position will be somewhat higher when compared to that of the buyer there. So he will be placing one order on him. That we will call it as a bill of exchange. Whereas in case of a promissory note, buyer he himself is writing and he is giving it. In other words, he is promising to pay it. His position is lower there. Okay, so here it is not an order, but it is a promise to pay it. So it is an undertaking. This is the only word which changes most here in this particular definition here. So it is an instrument in writing containing an unconditional undertaking signed by the maker. What for? To pay a certain sum of money only to or to the order of a certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. Okay. See, ఈ ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ అనేటటువంటిది ఏంటంటే బయ్యరు సెల్లర్కి రాసిస్తున్నాడు ఏమని నీ వద్ద నుండి పొందిన ప్రయోజనానికి గాను నీకు కానీ లేదా నీవు తెలిపిన వ్యక్తికి కానీ ఓకే ఇన్ని రోజుల తర్వాత నేను డబ్బులు చెల్లిస్తాను అని చెప్పేసి ఒక ప్రామిస్ చేస్తూ రాసేటటువంటి ఒక వాగ్దాన పత్రం ఇది. ఓకే, సో ప్రామిసరీ నోట్ అనేటటువంటిది ఒక వాగ్దాన పత్రము, బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ అనేటటువంటిది ఒక ఆదేశ పత్రం, ఒక ఆర్డర్ అన్నట్టు, ఆర్డర్ ఇన్స్ట్రుమెంట్ అది డిఫరెన్స్ అక్కడ ఉన్నటువంటిది. సో కమింగ్ టు ద ఫీచర్స్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ పర్టికులర్ ప్రామిసరీ నోట్, ఇఫ్ యూ అబ్జర్వ్, this promissory note is an instrument in writing there. Okay, it is an instrument in writing. Then again, it is a promise to pay. Okay, promise to pay. In other words, whatever he is promising it here to pay it, it is expressed here. That means it is written clearly. I promise to pay. Okay, it is expressed here. Then again, promise is an unconditional one. Okay, here because here also whatever is being accepted, it is accepted without keeping any particular conditions there. In other words, here, for whatever value I have received, I will pay you at a compulsorily I will pay you, like that he is making that particular promise without keeping any particular conditions there. Then again signed by the maker. Okay, it is signed by this particular person who is the maker. So maker, when we come across here, you should be able to know that for a particular promissory note there will be two parties. One is the maker, another one is the payee. Maker is nothing but here the buyer is the maker, whereas the seller is the payee. So maker is the person who makes this instrument. Payee is the person who receives the money on the due date from this particular maker for the promise made. So maker must be certain. Then again promise must be to pay a certain sum. Okay, in other words, here this promise is being made to pay some certain sum of money only. Okay, then again promissory note is a stamped instrument. Okay, according to the Stamp Act applicable, whatever value of stamps have to be affixed here, that much worth stamps are affixed. So by affixing the stamp and when by signing here, okay, this particular document will become a particular promise which is a legally binding one. Okay, in other words, here this particular instrument is enforceable in the court of law also if the time comes. So it is a stamped instrument. Then again the amount is payable in the legal tender money only. In other words, here whatever is being specified here, whatever that certain sum is written, it is payable in the legal tender of money in India. In other words, here in Indian currency it will be paid in India. So these are the features of a promissory note. ఓకే, సో సింపుల్గా మనకి చూసినట్టయితే దీనిలో ఉన్నటువంటి ఫీచర్స్ మనకి ఈ డెఫినేషన్ చూసుకుంటే మన ఫీచర్స్ అన్ని మీరు ఓన్గా కూడా రాయవచ్చు. ఓకే, ఇట్ ఈస్ ఆల్సో హ్యావింగ్ వన్ పర్టికులర్ ఎగ్జాక్ట్ డేట్ దేర్. ఓకే, ద ప్లేస్ వేర్ దట్ పర్టికులర్ ఇన్స్ట్రుమెంట్ ఈస్ బీయింగ్ రిటర్న్, and from this particular one again we can calculate the due date there, because 3 months after date means from this particular date we can calculate 3 days, 3 months there. Okay, and this particular promise is an unconditional one. Okay, without keeping any preconditions. The amount is written both in figures and words there, as such it is certain that exactness will come there. Okay, and further he is specifying with interest of 6% here. Okay, in other words, here this particular money I will pay you after 3 months with the interest at the rate of 6% per annum, like that he is promising to pay it. It is a stamped instrument. Okay, the name of this particular maker is written, and again the payee to whom the money has to be paid, it is also written there. So this is what promissory note. Okay, so simple concept here. If seller writes an instrument on the buyer, we will call it as a bill of exchange, whereas if the buyer writes an instrument on the seller, we will call it as a promissory note. Okay, so today in this particular topic we have studied what is a bill of exchange, what is a promissory note. So bill of exchange ante enti, promissory note ante enti, manaki ఇది ఫస్ట్ క్లాస్లో మనం ఇక్కడ వినడం అనేది జరిగింది. మన నెక్స్ట్ క్లాస్లో మనం ఏం చేస్తామనంటే నెక్స్ట్ బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్కి సంబంధించినటువంటి జనరల్ ఎంట్రీస్ ఎలా రాయాలి, డ్రావర్ బుక్స్లో ఎలా రాయాలి, డ్రాయి బుక్స్లో ఏమైనా రాయాలి, మనకు ఉన్నటువంటి బేసిక్ టాపిక్ వచ్చే వరకు బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ ఉంది. ఓకే, చట్టపరంగా మనం చూసినట్టయితే అకౌంటింగ్ బుక్స్లో మనం రాసేటప్పుడు మాత్రం ఈ బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్కి ప్రామిసరీ నోట్కి పెద్దగా అక్కడ అకౌంటింగ్లో మన బుక్స్లో మనం రాసేటప్పుడు మనకు తేడాలు అనేటువంటిది ఏముండవు. కానీ ఓవరాల్ కాన్సెప్ట్ అనేటటువంటిది ఎవరిపైన రాస్తున్నారు దాని ప్రకారం మనం దాన్ని బిల్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్చేంజ్ ప్రామిసరీ నోటు అనడం అనేది జరుగుతుంది అన్నట్టు. ఓకే, సో మనం నెక్స్ట్ పీరియడ్లో అదే దాన్ని చూద్దాం. నెక్స్ట్ క్లాస్ నెంబర్ 2 ఇంట్రడక్షన్ క్లాస్ 2 అవుతాయని చెప్పాను. ఫస్ట్ క్లాస్ ఇది. సెకండ్ క్లాస్ వచ్చే వరకు మనం జనరల్ ఎంట్రీస్, తర్వాత అకౌంట్స్కి సంబంధించినటువంటి మన ప్రాబ్లమ్కి రిలేటెడ్ మనం చూసుకోవడం అనేది జరుగుతుంది. ఓకే, దాని తర్వాత మళ్ళీ మన ప్రాబ్లమ్స్కి సంబంధించి ఒక 4 or 5 క్లాసెస్ మనం దాని మీద తీసేసుకుంటే మనకి చాలా చాప్టర్ అనేది చాలా సింపుల్గా ఈజీగా అండర్స్టాండబుల్గా ఉంటుంది. ఓకే, థ్యాంక్ యూ.